Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fundamentals of OneDrive. As entertaining as OneDrive fundamentals sound, it's probably going to be a little bit dry. I'm going to do my best to keep it entertaining. It is a little bit after 12. There's quite a few people on, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a reminder, we are recording this presentation, so whether you're watching it live today or sometime in the future, welcome to the presentation. We hope it's enjoyable. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation so that we can get through the material. There is a lot of material to cover in this. I got it what I think is going to be close to an hour. We'll kind of see how things flow. It might go quicker, it might go longer, but I'm hoping to get it right on the money for an hour. So let's get started. So we have several objectives for this training. So we want to talk about what is OneDrive, and a common question that comes up all the time that we're going to talk about is what is the difference between OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams? A lot of times these products are referred to interchangeably in the Microsoft world, and we'll kind of touch on why that is. We're going to talk about OneDrive privacy and retention holds within the organization and what that means for you. We're going to go through navigating OneDrive in a web browser and using Windows File Explorer. We're going to cover how to move files to OneDrive. So if there's things that you need to get into OneDrive or want to get into OneDrive, we'll talk about several different ways to accomplish that. We're going to talk about the different types of file availability. We're going to talk about sharing files within and outside the organization and what that looks like. We're going to talk about working within with documents in and outside of a browser. Those applications perform differently when we're working in and out of the browser, so we're going to talk about that. And we're going to cover version history, restoration of previous versions, and we'll round off the hour with a brief conversation about recovering deleted items, which is nice because historically, prior to OneDrive, if something was deleted from a company network share or something that was on some other sort of network, you would need to ask your IT administrator to please roll back a backup. OneDrive enables you to do that yourself, and we'll talk about that. So let's get started with a conversation about what is OneDrive. There's a lot of misconception out there about what it is and what it can do and what it can't do. So OneDrive is a Microsoft product that came out, I want to say, close to 20 years ago, if not a little bit longer, but somewhere right around 2000. Microsoft introduced OneDrive as kind of a value-added service for individuals to go along with their Microsoft Office product licenses. And it was, hey, you know, we're going to give you this space on the cloud, and we're going to let you store stuff on there, and it could be available for you from other places. It took a long time for that concept to catch on, and really the driving force behind that at the time was the cost of storage. So if we look at what the world was like 22 years ago, storage was fairly expensive. Now with modern technology, storage has become pretty cheap. So a lot of these companies give it away. There is no free lunch on the internet per se. So there's always something in it for the provider. But for the most part, storage is cheap, and it's given away as kind of a value-added service. So what this enables is for us now in 2022 is file accessibility from anywhere around the world as long as you have an internet connected device. The ability to share files inside or outside the organization, working together in real time on collaboration. So real-time collaboration on documents, we'll talk about that. Accurate and deep search capabilities to find files. So one benefit that OneDrive provides to you is when you search OneDrive, it's thoroughly indexed. Not just the file names and the file types, but also to some extent file content. So it's a great place to store documents if you want to come back later and look for certain things, phrases, catchwords, whatever it is. Those are indexed by Microsoft, and their search feature is pretty robust. Automatic file backups and protections, which we'll cover, and everyone always asks, it's on the cloud, is it secure? Microsoft is certified by the Department of Defense and by the U.S. Department of Health Services as DoD and HIPAA compliant for secure storage. And the ACA does participate in what's called the government portal. So we have an extra layer of security that's provided for government entities that is not readily available in the consumer version. So our environment is pretty secure. So let's talk about the difference, because this comes up a lot in conversation. OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams, what's the difference? OneDrive is designed to be your personal space. It's your storage for anything that you want to store that's business related. OneDrive can be used to share your files with others. OneDrive can be used to allow others to work on your personal files. OneDrive storage is unlimited for each user. So you and your personal OneDrive space can have as much stuff in the cloud as you want. SharePoint, on the other hand, is the organization's file storage. Generally speaking, when a decision is made as to do we use OneDrive, do we use SharePoint, it depends on what you're trying to do. What is the use case? Generally speaking, SharePoint is for anything that has an organization-wide impact. So for example, the accounting team would probably like a SharePoint site to share things with the rest of the organization. And within SharePoint, you can have controls as to this is for everyone in the organization to see. This is for just people in my group to see. And we'll talk about sharing and permissions a little bit as we get into the presentation. What we're going to cover today kind of scratches the surface and gets you going. There is a whole lot more that we could talk about in terms of file sharing and permissions down the road or as the need arises. One thing to keep in mind is SharePoint does have a capacity limit based upon how many licensed users are in the organization. So the ACA, we subscribe so that we have enough users for everyone who works here and a little bit extra to account for growth. And that comes with a cap. So the reason I bring it up is OneDrive and SharePoint is designed to be used for different functions to accommodate those storage needs. So we wouldn't want to put everything in SharePoint because we reach our storage limitations, and then there's a cost associated with that. But the things that are not for the whole organization, that's your fit. That's really your sweet spot for OneDrive. It's things for you, things for you to share with maybe a select group of people. And then Teams is a bolt-on to SharePoint. So when Microsoft introduced the Teams product, they built it on top of the SharePoint platform to integrate storage file capacity, file storage sharing, and team management permissions. And they added all of the Teams features on top of the SharePoint product. So anytime you create a team in Teams, it creates a subsequent SharePoint site that matches that team in Teams. So think of Teams as the top layer that gives you your communication functionality for meetings, for chat, for online collaboration, and the underlying storage file capacity is done in SharePoint. So it would not be unusual to have a Teams site set up in Teams and then extend some of that functionality to other users in the organization through SharePoint. And generally, when those come up, what I like to tell people is let's have a conversation, understand the use case, and let's see what the best fit is for what it is we're trying to accomplish. Record retention. All items in OneDrive are kept in accordance with the retention schedule that is configured in Office 365 that's in alignment with our legal requirements for retention. So your OneDrive, so I see Kevin O'Shea's at the top of my attendee list at the moment. So Kevin's OneDrive is Kevin's. Kim or Angie or Lauren, they could not just browse to Kevin's OneDrive and review his documents or his files. They belong to him and they're secure and only accessible to his account. There is one exception to that, and I just want to touch on it in the interest of transparency. The director of IT at the ACA does have the ability to do what's called e-discovery. So in the event of separation or a legal requirement, we do have the capability to dive in and extract data specific to an individual if necessary. We do have a checkpoint in place that makes sure that no one person can take advantage of that, in that when an e-discovery search is launched, it does trigger a series of alerts which are actively monitored by our help desk vendor, and there's a protocol in place that if anything unusual occurs, they have a notification list. So there's always a check and balance. So feel secure that your stuff is your stuff and it belongs to you, and other people don't go rummaging through it. One of the questions that come up all the time is, for example, if you have a lot of things that you want to store in OneDrive, such as, for example, pirated music and movies. You have unlimited storage that's provided to you by the ACA. Does it sound like a good idea to use that to your advantage and store all your pirated movies and music? No, please don't do that. So at this point in the presentation, we're 15 minutes in. I've taught classes for a lot of time, and I can look at the audience and I can see in everyone's eyes that you're saying, dude, really just show me how to use OneDrive, right? Like, that's why I'm here. I get it. Like, you want to give me a background, that's cool. Just show me how to use it. I'm a busy person. Let's get moving. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the browser. So Microsoft Edge is designed to work seamlessly with Office 365. Microsoft Edge is available for download for Mac users. I understand that there are big fans of Google Chrome or Firefox, and for the most part, those browsers work great when working with the Office 365 platform. There are certain pieces of functionality that Microsoft builds into the Edge browser to make the experience better when using Office 365. I've encountered some of those on an administrative end, but for the most part, other browsers work okay. I always recommend that you use Edge while you're working within the Microsoft Office 365 platform. So the first thing we'll talk about is we'll start basic and we'll build up from there. One, how do I get there? For some, that might sound like a silly thing to talk about. For others, you may have never used this product and this is new to you. So let's talk about that. If you're going to get there from the browser, the easiest thing to do is go to OneDrive.com. If you go to OneDrive.com, you are prompted with a sign-on screen, and there's two places you could sign on the browser. The top right, you should have an icon that says sign in, or on the bottom left, there's an icon or a link that says you already have OneDrive, go ahead and sign in. You do not need to create a new account for this. OneDrive is built into your Office 365 subscription as it sits right now. Once you log in to OneDrive, let me go back one slide. If you log in through OneDrive.com, it'll take you right into your OneDrive environment. The other way to get into OneDrive is through Office.com. And this is the most common because a lot of people are familiar with Office.com. If you want to get into OneDrive, most times if you click the little waffle at the top left, it'll bring you up the rest of the apps that are available to you through Office 365, and just click on OneDrive. In many cases, this will trigger an MFA, a multi-factor authentication. If it does, you'll be prompted for it on your phone or whatever your MFA is that you have set up, and then you should be up and running. And then once you're in, you can see your files. So in this case, I used OneDrive.com, I logged in, and now I have access to my files through the web browser. Super simple there. Now we're going to use File Explorer. So File Explorer, a lot of people don't realize that they can access today, right now, their OneDrive from File Explorer on their computer. And in this case, if we click on our File Explorer folder that's on our taskbar, you'll see that it pulls up OneDrive. There we go. That's the one I wanted. So you'll see that it pulls up File Explorer. And if you look on the left, the reason why I threw this slide in here at the last moment is because sometimes people get confused. Because, for example, I have two things that are related to OneDrive. The one on the top, Arizona Commerce Authority, those are my SharePoint sites. The one I'm interested in for today and for using OneDrive is the one that starts with OneDrive. So you've got the blue cloud, it says OneDrive, Arizona Commerce Authority, and that will then take me into my OneDrive, and I have the same access, the same functionality that I do through my Windows desktop as I do in the browser. This is a great tool to integrate it, that Microsoft did to integrate it within Windows so that you don't have to go to a browser to get at your files. There are other products out there that behave similarly, but they require software to be installed. This functionality is already built into the Windows platform. So let's start out with something simple. Let's move files to OneDrive. So ACA employees who use a Windows computer automatically have certain folders that are automatically synced to OneDrive for backup recovery purposes. There are generally three: desktop, documents, and pictures. Those are already being backed up and synchronized to OneDrive. It doesn't impact the way you work with them necessarily. We'll talk about some of the little quirks that come with that. But the reason why it's important to know the folders that are automatically backed up to OneDrive is it does impact your experience when working in OneDrive, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail when we get into some specifics. So let's talk about scenario one. You have a folder on your computer. In this case, I have one. It's called C:\CDW quotes. I want to move the entire folder to OneDrive. I will be working with the documents in OneDrive from this point forward, and I want to keep the original file dates intact. So to perform the move, I'm going to use a drag and drop technique. sounds simple. It's going to look simple. We're going to talk about it because as we look at these different techniques, I'll show you how it impacts files differently. So to perform the move, we open the folder location using File Explorer. We open OneDrive using File Explorer. And then what I like to do is adjust the window sizes so that both locations appear on the screen. If I'm using two screens, I'll have one on the left, one on the right. So I end up with something that looks kind of like this. So I have my C drive on the left with my CDW quotes. I have my OneDrive on the right. And all I'm going to do is click, drag, and drop. So it's super simple. You left click, you hold the folder, and I can do the whole folder. You left click the folder and you drag it over across the screen from your C drive to your OneDrive, and then OneDrive will automatically sort it for you alphabetically. And in this case, I dropped it into the empty space on the bottom right, and OneDrive sorted it for me. And you could see now that it moved from my C drive on the left to my OneDrive on the right. So what does that mean? What that means is I've done essentially a cut and paste. I've taken the files from location 1 and physically moved them to location 2. And we'll talk about the difference in a little bit between cut, paste, copy, paste, and how it impacts files. So in this case, the drag and drop replicates a cut and paste. So my original files are moved from the C drive to OneDrive. The file creation and modified dates remain intact, and the file is available on and offline. We'll discuss that in detail in a little bit. So just remember, drag and drop, when we're dragging from the computer to OneDrive, it essentially acts as a cut and paste, keeping all the metadata associated with the file intact. Scenario 2, I'm just going to do a basic cut and paste. So I have a folder on my computer. I'm going to do the same example. For time, I'm just going to kind of gloss over this because it's the same thing we just did before. You can use your Windows shortcuts in OneDrive. So Control X and Control V work. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the old-fashioned right-click cut and paste. So all I did is go to my C drive on the left, highlighted CDW quotes, right-click, select the cut option, navigate over to the right side of my screen, click any empty space on OneDrive, and then I select paste. And it will move the entire folder from point A to point B. And again, it's keeping the metadata intact. It's a cut and paste. So here you can see in this example, I pulled up the metadata associated with the files. On the left being the original C drive file, on the right being the OneDrive file. Created, modified, access dates, all remain consistent throughout the process. There's another feature in OneDrive. It's actually called the Move to OneDrive feature. So in this scenario, I want to move files from my computer to OneDrive. I will be working with the documents in OneDrive from this point forward. I want to keep the original file dates intact. So to perform the move, I want to create a folder in OneDrive, and I'm going to use the Move to OneDrive feature. Now, I will caution you here in this scenario. I'm using this as an example to show you how this might not be ideal. So in this particular case, I've gone to OneDrive. I'm going to create a new folder in File Explorer. Works like any other drive on your computer. Pick an empty space, right click. We're going to do a new folder. And in this case, I called it my new folder for stuff. Now, if I go to my C drive, what you're seeing here is you're seeing a document that resides in that CDW quote folder that I was working on my C drive. If I right click that, I have a cool feature that's available to me that says move to OneDrive. So if I right click it, click on move to OneDrive, it's going to move it to OneDrive. However, where did I go? Wrong slide. So my question is, using this technique, did it keep my metadata intact? In this case, it did. I'm going to show you some examples where it doesn't, because I know it comes up from time to time where people want to keep that data consistent. So where we start to run into problems is when we're using a network drive and we're moving things from a network drive to OneDrive. That's where things can get confusing for people. So in this scenario, I'm moving things from a network share that's provided by my organization, and I want to move documents to OneDrive. And you're going to be working with those documents in OneDrive from this point forward. I want to keep the original file dates intact, et cetera, et cetera. I stress that I want to move the files to OneDrive and work in OneDrive from this point forward, because what I'm showing you, as we talked about, has the effect of cut and paste, right? So I'm actually moving the file from the computer into OneDrive. I'm not making a copy of it. I'm moving it. So when I'm doing this from a network drive, if I drag items, it has the same effect as copy and paste, different than cut and paste. And I'm going to show you the impact of that real quick. So if I go into OneDrive and I create a folder, and let me point out here also, I threw this slide in here to give you a demonstration of how this looks in the browser also, because I wanted to make sure we covered both. Most people like to work in File Explorer, but I do want to show you the browser effect of it also. So in this case, I've gone into my OneDrive browser, and I'm going to add a new folder. So in this case, I'm just using the blue button, and I'm creating a folder, stuff and things here. And this is that empty folder. Not a whole lot different in terms of functionality. You can do most of the same stuff in the browser. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit, and I'll show you File Explorer versus the browser, and we'll talk about that a little bit so that you can see what the differences are. But in this case, if I use the browser to do this, one thing I want to point out to you is it's going to change the file creation and modified dates. And the reason why is when I am dragging things from the computer to OneDrive, OneDrive is making a copy of it. It's not actually moving it. So the difference between the two, when I'm using File Explorer and I move the file into OneDrive, it actually moves it. If I use the browser, it makes a copy. When I make a copy of it, I'm creating a new instance of that folder, so I lose my original metadata. So now my file creation date is going to be now, because that file is new. It's a copy of the original. It's not the original. It's a duplicate of it. So if I look at the metadata associated with that, it's going to show that my modified date is going to be the date and time that I did it. And if we drill into the details a little bit, the details would also show you that the creation date is going to be at that moment in time. So there's a downside to using the browser in some of these instances to move files. If you don't care about those dates, no worries. You can drag and drop using the browser all day long. And then I'm going to show you the upload feature too. You could use that all day long. So when you use the upload feature or you use drag and drop in the browser, it has the same effect as copy and paste, different than cut and paste. Your file creation and modified dates are new, and then the original document remains in the place where you got it from. So one benefit of the upload feature is you can move entire folders in a single click, which I'll show you here in a second. So if we're in the browser, I can see the upload feature, and I can move entire folders using upload. You can do the same thing with drag and drop in File Explorer, but depending on what you're moving and how much you want to move, some people like to use the browser and just do an upload. One benefit of it is it kind of runs in the background and doesn't require you to sit there and watch it. So a lot of people like that. I do recommend this if you're not concerned about metadata and keeping that intact. And as you see here, I'll walk you through it real quick. If I go to upload, I'm going to select a folder. It's going to give me the option to select the folder. I created a folder that's called Today's Stuff that's on my U drive in this particular case. And I'm going to upload that from the U drive to OneDrive. And I'm going to get an alert that says you want to upload 4 files to the site. Only do this if you trust the site, and we're going to upload it. And there it is. Happens fairly quickly. It's a nice feature, and if you're not concerned about metadata, this is an easy way to move things. And then here you can see all the files. The reason why I took this picture here in this screenshot is to show you that the file modified creation dates do get changed because this is technically a new file. It's not the original file, it's a copy of the original file. So one benefit of that, as you can imagine, is it does leave the original file intact in its original location. So for example, if you wanted to just use this, let's say to back up certain things, but you weren't going to work with them, you could do that and make copies of those files. I would caution you though, if you do that, you need to have a file management plan in mind so that you're not overwriting changes or you know where original files are. So things to remember: cutting and pasting files, it changes the physical location of the file. It moves it physically from point A to point B. It does not modify the timestamp and metadata on a file. Created and modified dates are not manipulated. Copy and pasting files makes a copy of the file. The original file location remains intact. Created modified dates are not manipulated on the original file. They are on the new file, not on the original file. The copied file is new, and that will be reflected in the metadata. The created data of the new file will be stamped with the current date and time the copy was created. This is not a malfunction of the system. It's by design to maintain a digitally forensically sound copy. And the files are mutually exclusive, which we just kind of touched on. They're not linked together in any way. They function separately. So if you're working on one in OneDrive and it's a copy and you don't understand why you made changes in OneDrive and they don't appear on the file that's on your computer, it's because you've made a copy of it and they're mutually exclusive. So that is a simple way to move things. Move to OneDrive, just a couple quick tidbits. Move to OneDrive feature is not available for files that are not physically on your computer. You can use any of the other methods that we talked about, but the Move to OneDrive feature, which is the right click and the blue cloud icon, is not available for anything that is already in a share, cloud share, or a network enterprise-wide network file share. Your desktop documents and pictures are already there. Just keep that in mind. The reason why you want to know that is because if you move things from your desktop into OneDrive, you're making another copy of it. So you can actually end up making more than one copy, and it can create some confusion if you don't have some file management techniques in mind. And we'll kind of show some of those here as we go on. So the next thing I want to talk about that comes up all the time as a common question is, what do the symbols mean when you're looking at OneDrive? So here I did a snapshot of mine, and you can see a bunch of different symbols. I'll kind of go over those. So if you have a file with the kind of like the do not enter kind of sign there, it's a circle with the line through it. Admin has blocked the synchronization of certain file types. I would have to look at our Office 365 admin rules to make sure, but I don't believe that we have any restrictions in place on files that you can put into your OneDrive. If you come across that icon when you're trying to move something into OneDrive, please let us know and we'll take a look at it and understand why and then correct it. If you have an icon with the blue cloud and a person next to it, that means that you have shares in place for this folder or for files within it. That's something to keep in mind if you're going to move something, for example. So let's say you create a share, you're sharing things with people in your organization, time goes by, you forget about it, maybe a year or two has gone by and you want to move some things. That's a nice little reminder for yourself that, hey, I've shared this with others. Let me take a look and understand the impact if I move this. The blue cloud icon means that your OneDrive files and folders are only available online. Online only files do not take up any space on your computer. The green tick icons. When you open a online only file, it downloads to your device and becomes a locally available file. You can open a locally available file anytime, even without internet access. We're going to talk a little bit about how to set some of these rules here in a few minutes. If you absolutely need something available on your computer that needs to be available without the internet, we're going to use a different setting, which is always keep on this device. And I'm going to show you how to do that here in a couple minutes. So anything that's set for always keep on this device, it has a green circle with a white check mark, and that's what you would see next to the file or folder. Padlock icon. If the file, so if you have some sort of setting on the file or folder that prevents it from synchronizing up to OneDrive, you're going to see the padlock icon. That's pretty rare. So let's talk about file availability status. So in this scenario, I have a file that I want to be available to me through OneDrive from any device anywhere in the world. I want that file to be on my computer so I can work on it while I'm on the plane, because I ain't paying American Airlines what they want to use their Wi-Fi that enables me to use my computer, because they've got a couple different options on the airplane, right? Like you can watch movies and get music, or you can actually do work, and they charge you more depending on what you want. So I want that file to be on my computer. So if I'm out in the desert and I'm riding my dune buggy and I feel the need to flip open a laptop and do some work, it's there. I'm not worried about cell towers for internet. I'm not worried about Wi-Fi. I'm not worried about any of that. I can do the work while I'm in the middle of the desert. And what we do to do that, how we achieve that is we make the file always keep on this device status. So to do that, we use File Explorer, we find the file, and we set that status. And this is how we do that. So in this particular case, I'm inside my OneDrive, and I have a text document there. It's called new text document.txt. If you look at the icon next to it, it has the cloud. As we remember, because we just talked about it, the cloud means it's only available to me online. So if for some reason I'm not paying American Airlines and I'm out on my dune buggy, I cannot access this file. In order to correct that, I right-click on the file and I select the option, always keep on this device. What that does is that enables you to work on the file offline. Once your computer hits the internet, it will synchronize those changes up to OneDrive at a later time. Keep in mind, this does take up storage space on your computer. So where I see that come around and cause people grief is, let's say they got a full hard drive and they say, hey, I want to offload some of my pirated movies onto OneDrive. So they go through the process of moving a lot of stuff to OneDrive. It takes a lot of time to sync. They're 2-hour movies. And they go up to OneDrive and you look at your hard drive and you say, I didn't save any space. The reason why you didn't save any space is because they're kept, it's because they're enabled for keep on this device. So even though they're in the cloud, they're in OneDrive, they still took up space on your computer. Oops, my icon got out of line there. So after a file has finished copying to your computer, the icon will change from the blue cloud to the green dot with a check mark. While the copying is occurring, you will see the blue arrows chasing each other icon, which is conveniently located over the third sentence there. And so depending on the size of the file, you can see that little arrow icon there for a couple seconds or a couple hours, depending on what you're moving. So if you're moving something that's large, that's into the gigabytes of size, that could take some time to synchronize. So if you're moving a large amount of data at one time, I always ask people, do themselves a favor. Once you start the data move, leave your computer on and online so that OneDrive will run in the background and synchronize things up for you. It's not an instant process depending on what you're moving. You know, if you've got, 5 letters and a couple spreadsheets you want to move to OneDrive, that synchronization will occur in seconds. If you're moving hundreds or maybe thousands of those types of files, it will take a couple hours to get that synchronization set up. You can continue to work with those files and folders on your computer, and OneDrive will catch up, but it will keep churning in the background. And a common complaint that I've seen in IT that happens often is a business unit might set up a share in OneDrive, and they'll set up the share and they'll give access to people, and they'll say, hey, Chester, I've set up this share. I know people have access to it. They can't see the files that I've put in there. 99 out of 100 times, the answer is it hasn't finished syncing yet. So if you're doing something where you're creating a new share and you're moving a significant amount of data into that share, you might want to just remind people, hey, it's a new share, the data's moving, be patient. It could take a few minutes to a few hours, again, depending on how much stuff we're moving. So now you'll see in this example, I set my new text document to be available all the time, and my checkbox has changed to exactly what Microsoft predicted it would. It's a green circle with a white check mark. OneDrive is always standing by to sync. If you look at the bottom right of your computer, you will probably see a blue cloud, and you may or may not see the chasing arrows. That is good. You want to see those. That tells you that OneDrive is working, and it's working in the background and it's synchronizing. If you click on that cloud, it'll tell you exactly what it's doing. So if you click on the cloud, it'll say, hey, it's processing changes, and it'll show you what it's processing. So if you're ever curious as to what's going on with your OneDrive, you can click on the cloud and it'll show you. Be wary of these symbols. If you see anything with a red X over your cloud or in the bottom right over your OneDrive icon, OneDrive is not happy. What it's telling you is that there's certain files or folders that it's unable to sync. If you click on the icon, it will give you the details behind the problem. A lot of times when you click on those and it tells you what the problem is, it also will give you steps to take to resolve the problem. Most of the time, you're able to resolve these on your own, and they're usually simple fixes. If you do run into problems, again, reach out to the IT department. We're always happy to help. In many cases, though, take a look at it first and see if there's something it's telling you, hey, this can't sync because you have it open and you're using it in a different window. Well, maybe you have it open, you don't realize it's open. You want to close it and allow it to sync. Those are common problems. A gray OneDrive cloud with a line through it, that means you're not signed into OneDrive. Again, this is a very common problem. If this occurs, go ahead and click the icon and log into OneDrive. The most common cause of this coming up is that you're due for a multi-factor authentication. So if you click it, you'll be prompted for your logon credentials, and then your phone will click, and depending on what you're using, whether it be text or authenticator, you'll either punch in a code or click approve, and it'll get you right back into OneDrive. Sharing files with others. Two primary ways to set up file shares with others: File Explorer and the browser. Organization makes your life easier. So what I'm saying here is set up shares in a logical manner so that they're easy to manage and understand. Considering setting up a folder for all things that you share, considering setting up subfolders. Avoid sharing a single file with those you share frequently. So for example, Dan Brooks, he's down the hall. We share a lot of files together. I always tell Dan, hey, do me a favor, instead of sending me a shared file, just give me a bucket or a folder, a bucket of data that we're sharing, and then I can just reference that. This way I don't have to keep track of all the individual documents. Depending on the use case, go ahead and reach out to the IT department. I would love to hear from you and talk about what exactly it is that you're trying to accomplish, because maybe SharePoint's a better option, and we could have a conversation about what the end is, what your end game is, and we could see if SharePoint might be a better solution. So in this case, I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I'm here in my OneDrive, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call that folder Stuff to Share. So on the left, you're seeing the folder that I just created, Stuff to Share. And on the right, you're seeing all the people that I want to share things with. I have a share for Dan. I have a share for Kim. I have a share for Lauren. I have a share for Marcom. And I have a share for operations. These are, in my example, the people that I share most commonly with, right? So stuff that's just for Lauren, I could just drop into her share. If it's something that I want to share with the entire operations team, I could drop it into the operations share. These are folders that I've set up sharing on in advance. So this is when I start talking about file organization. If you keep your files organized and do something intuitive with them to make it easier for you to keep track of, this kind of makes your life a little bit easier. So in this particular case, I want to set up, again, I'll go back just for reference, Stuff to Share, Dan Share on the right. Now I need to share that with Dan. So the easiest way to do that is I go into File Explorer and I right click on OneDrive, or I'm sorry, I right click on the folder Dan Share, and I just select the blue cloud share. When I select the blue cloud share, I have several options that are available to me, which you'll see. The first option is, what do I want to happen in terms of who can see this? In this case, people in the Arizona Commerce Authority that I'm going to allow the access to with the link. Let me drop that down for you so you can see your other options. Anyone with the link. If I share it to anyone with the link, the danger of that is if the link gets out, anyone literally can access those files. If I select people in Arizona Commerce Authority and I add Dan to that, then it's just for Dan. People with existing access, this comes into play for more advanced sharing, which we'll cover in a different class for time constraints, because there are quite a bit of different gyrations we could do with sharing in OneDrive and SharePoint. Or if we want to go outside the organization, we use the option specific people. Because if I say people in Arizona's Commerce Authority, but I want to share it with someone, let's say at the Department of Economic Security, they can't get to it because they're not part of our organization. So even if I add their email to it and send this off to them, it's not going to let them in. So outside the organization, specific people. Inside the organization, people in the Arizona Commerce Authority. And you'll see here I have other settings. Nope, let me go back, sorry. I have other settings. So if I click this drop down on other settings, I can change it from edit and view. If you want people to be able to drop you things into a folder, you need to give them edit permissions. If you want people just to see content but not manipulate or download, you're going to change it to view. So in this particular case, what was I talking about? So now here I created a folder, Bruce from Candor. So this goes into the scenario we were just talking about, someone outside the organization. So if I wanted to share that folder with someone from outside the organization, oops, keep hitting the wrong button, sorry. I'm going to go to specific people. So in this particular case, if I want to give it to Bruce from Candor, specific people, I plug in his email address. And then again, same thing, can edit, can view. If you want them to be able to make changes, they need to have the can edit option. And if we go back, so just to tidy this up and show you the full effect of it, if I start typing, in this case, Dan, so I start typing his name, Dan Brooks, you'll see him pop up in the list. I need to select that. And then from there, I can send off that invitation for sharing. And if I want, I can add a little customized message there. Hi, Dan, the files are in this folder. And I can send that off. I can also, again, we're limited on time. I'm not going to be able to show you everything. I can just copy that link, drop it into an email also. As long as it goes to Dan, Dan can get in there. Trying to think if there's anything else we want to cover in that. Again, sharing can get very complicated. If you have a complicated share that you want to set up, let us know. Be happy to walk you through it. This gives you a really basic overview of how to share things inside and outside the organization. Skip that for time. So working with documents, when I'm working with a document, I have a couple different options. I can work with the document in the browser. I can work in the document through File Explorer, which will open it up in the desktop application in Office 365. So in this particular case, I have a document called 2022.docs, D-O-C-X. In this case, as you could tell, I'm in the browser. If I open this document in the browser, it opens in Microsoft Word in my browser. The browser application is different than the desktop application. It has different functionality. It has a different layout. It looks different. It feels different. When you're working in the browser app, automatic saving is enabled. Version control is enabled. The document can be shared from the document. So if you notice at the top right of the document, I have a button for sharing. So while I'm within this document working on it, I can share it right from here. I don't need to do anything else if I just need to share this document. Or let's say, for example, it's for Dan, or let's say it's for Bruce from Candor. I can drop this document into the share folder that I've already created, and they would automatically have access to it. Vice versa, if I'm in File Explorer, I double click the document 2022.docs. It opens in Microsoft Word, which is the traditional Word installed in your computer that you're used to seeing. Again, because I'm working in OneDrive, automatic saving is turned on. When is this a problem for people? I'll tell you when it's a problem for me, when I run into a challenge with this. I have, let's say, for example, I'll use an example, a job description. And I have a job description for Help Desk Analyst 2. Well, now I want to hire a Help Desk Analyst 1, and I want to make the job description a little bit different. So I open up my Help Desk Analyst 2 job description, and I start typing in on it, making changes to it. And all of a sudden I realize my autosave is turned on, and I've now changed my Help Desk Analyst 2 job description when I didn't really want to. So keep that in mind. To avoid that pitfall, make a copy of the document first if you're going to use an existing document as a template for a new one. That's the most common place people run into problems with autosave. Or if you want, you can turn off autosave. It cannot be turned off by default, but you can turn it off when you open the document. And again, similar functionality, automatic save is enabled, version control is enabled, and you can share automatically from the document. Again, it's at the top right of the application. You can click share and share it right then. Let me go back. Let me talk about this real quick. If you're going to work collaboratively, let's say, for example, we have a Excel file, and I need 5 different people to work on this Excel file at the same time. I always recommend in this case to use the browser version of Excel. Microsoft clearly states in their documentation it doesn't matter. I have seen, my personal experience is, I have seen the browser version work better with multiple people in the document at one time. It prevents overwrites more effectively than if someone is using desktop application. Microsoft will tell you it doesn't matter. I will tell you from my experience, I encourage you to use the browser if you're collaborating in real time with multiple people. It just seems to work better. Version control, it's built into Office 365 for documents. The default setting keeps the 500 most recent versions. So I'll show you how that works real quick. Here we are, my File Explorer, OneDrive. I expand that, and I have my OneDrive on the left. You'll see that the same thing is on the right. In this case, I'm going to go in. All I'm doing here is I'm navigating to a document. I'm going to go into migration plans, and I have the MFA implementation plan that we rolled out back in July. If I open that document and I click on at the top left, File, Info, Version History, again, oops. File, Info, Version History, I can see all the previous revisions, up to 500 of them, that I can revert this document back to at any time. So let's take the example we talked about where, hey, I'm redoing this job description, I need to make another one. And I go, ah, darn it, I didn't mean to overwrite all of that. I can just revert it back to the previous version and not have to replicate all that work again. So that's built into your Office 365. Recovering deleted items. Use the browser. So we talked about it in the beginning. Use your browser, either office.com or OneDrive.com, and the deleted items are in the recycle bin. So once you log in online, you have a recycle bin, and you can recover deleted items that are in the recycle bin. So in this particular case, everything I've ever deleted from OneDrive is there, and I can recover it back to its original location. All I have to do is check the box next to it and click Restore, and it goes right back to where it was. All right, and that is, wow, that was pretty good. That's 1 hour on the nose. So let me turn off recording. Stop recording.